Well, good morning, or good afternoon, or good day. It depends on what time of the world you're in. So we'll kick this off with our Quincus, Talks 14. This one is a great subject because it's actually something that we have all been faced with, with the pandemic, and about being resilience. And resilience is all about how are we supposed to be tough during this time in pandemic? And I'm here with some great people. And to kick us off, I'll let Kevin take the floor so that he can give us a full introduction, and he's going to help us moderate this amazing chat, this talk. So welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us.
Great. Good morning, everybody, or as Katherina said, good afternoon, or wherever you might be, good day. So thank you for joining this topical call this morning, and thank you to Quincus for inviting me to chair and moderate today. I'll be asking a few questions of our esteemed panelists. I'm Kevin Green. I'm Marketing Communications Director at Logistics UK, and for those of you that don't know us, we're one of the biggest business groups in the UK, and also the only membership organisation that represents all of logistics in the UK. Our role on behalf of our 20,000 or so members is to support, shape and stand up for safe and efficient logistics. So spot on in terms of theme. I'm also delighted to report, because I feel I should, that Logistics UK won the coveted Trade Association of the Year award in the recent MEMCOM Awards, which is our sort of industry awards. I think primarily for our influence over government policy, our policy wins from some of the campaigns that we run, our media reach and impact, and our wider support to our members. And that was a great night, but well deserved, I think. I would say that. So I think, look, disruption to supply chains has been a recurring theme in our work, and there's certainly been some challenges for national and global supply chains in the past few years. I think all of us want a period of stability. That would be nice, which we haven't really had since David Cameron, remember him? Announced in 2015 that we were going to have a referendum on membership of the European Union. And since then, we've had the Brexit vote, COVID, fuel crisis, energy crisis, cost of living crisis, rampant inflation, political and economic instability, shortening of timescales for decarbonisation in logistics and transport, a skills shortage that's quite acute, a war in Europe, and now potential rolling energy blackouts. So goodness, how have we coped? It seems to be that our supply chains are pretty resilient already, actually. But I guess what that long list of disruptors tells us is that we live in increasingly uncertain times. And whilst we think things can't possibly get any worse, we keep getting reminded that yes, they probably can. So in a world increasingly dependent on just-in-time production, next-day delivery, how do we try to protect our supply chains and the economy from old or new shocks? And more importantly, perhaps for today, what's the ever-increasing role of technology in building supply chain resilience and keeping Britain and our economy moving? So to help solve that dilemma, or at least provide some insights for us, I'm delighted to be joined this morning by three expert practitioners who've been here throughout the past few disruptive years and have a keen eye on the future. So firstly, I'd like to welcome Gerrie. Al is founder of Zig Zag Global, a fully managed returns SaaS platform that provides retailers with a returns portal for consumer goods to return online, connecting retailers to a global network of over 220 warehouses, 1,000 carrier services and multiple international marketplaces. Al has over 20 years retail logistics and e-commerce experience and is a great fountain of knowledge for our webinar this morning. So welcome, Al.
Thank you very much.
Our next panelist is Nick Winder. Nick is Group Managing Director of Win Logistics, which is a specialist logistics consultancy and also helps advise on mergers and acquisitions. He's also co-founder of Express Logistics, an SME haulage business servicing UK clients. And if that weren't enough, he's also the creator of the Talent Exchange app, which helps to bring much needed new talent to the logistics sector. Nick's experience in many aspects of logistics have helped set him up as an advocate for the industry, providing education, connecting bright and ambitious professionals to exciting and very necessary opportunities. So warm welcome, Nick. Our third panelist today is Katherina Lacey, who's already introduced herself. Katherina is the co-founder and chief product officer at Quincus. She has many years of marketing, research and entrepreneurial experience, and now leads the development of Quincus's strategic direction and product vision. So welcome again, Katherina.
Thank you, Kevin.
So I'm going to lead a discussion around some of the key issues. There will be an opportunity for you to ask questions today, and we'll come to those at the end of the discussion. So feel free at any point. You should be able to see a Q&A chat box on your screen. So if you've got any questions that pop up at any point during the discussion today, then please feel free to stick them in there, and we'll try and address as many of those as we can when we get to the end of the discussion. So let's get into it, shall we? I'd like to start with a fairly open-ended question, if I may, to my panelists. So with so many big disruptors to normal life and trade in the last few years, what are the main things we've learned about the need for resilience in our supply chains? And perhaps if I ask that question to Al to start with.
So I think there have been a few really key moments for Zig Zag in the last few years that have happened, but COVID is the biggest driver, and the change pretty much overnight in buying behaviour that's really affected the way we operate and the way our customers expect to be. What we've seen is that there are an older demographic of buyers that are coming online for the first time. There are more shoppers buying than ever before, and the bedroom has become the new fitting room. So particularly where e-commerce is concerned, we've seen buyers buying multiple sizes, multiple colours. They're buying with the intention of returning products now. So that's a really growing trend that's here to stay, and we haven't really seen that change at all. Some of the things that we were experiencing pre-COVID in terms of buyer behaviour are starting to come back. So people are returning to stores, but not in the numbers they were. And so I think it's been a permanent shift towards online shopping, and that translates for us in terms of more demand, and the customer experience has become really key over the last couple of years. So returns were a bit of a dirty word a few years ago, and now retailers lead with the returns policy. We find more customers check the returns policy than any other page on the website, apart from the checkout page. So it's the second most visited page. It really is critical to a good customer journey. One other key stat I'll give you is 33% of customers bought with the intention of returning pre-pandemic. That number's risen to 41% post-pandemic. So they're buying 2 or 3 sizes, 2 or 3 colours, and they know there's going to be a return before the checkout. And that's kind of where we've been the right business at the right time to help facilitate that for retailers.
Wow, yeah, that must be a bit of a worry for retailers when the returns page is their most popular website page.
It's a challenge, and I think you'll see that increase as paid returns become more and more important. We've seen more and more retailers adopting a paid returns stance, particularly Zara and Boohoo, most recently, the big names, and other retailers are now following that trend.
Great, thanks, Alan. And maybe Katherina, can I ask you the same question? So what are the main things we've learned about the need for resilience in supply chains?
Well, I was going to add on to what Al was saying. I completely agree. I think a lot of people have started to be okay with online shopping and, choosing sizes. I mean, one of the things that, when you're touching things and stuff like that, that is still something that I still need to almost go to a store for. But the pandemic has actually taught us that, we can buy directly online, which then creates like a rush and expectation of things. For example, they're expected to have inventory. They're expected to have also the availability to get things to you quickly. But people are starting to realize that people don't realize what it takes for a logistic player to actually be able to do that. All the connections that needs to happen within the space for them to check their WMS, for them to check if there's drivers available, for them to check if, they can actually get the product from either the warehouse or the facility or the distribution center or whatnot. And all that plays into actually being resilient for a supply, for any type of person in the supply chain. So it's interesting because, the customer sitting there at home and saying, okay, I can't wait to get my product. And then you have all these people behind the scene that are rushing just to get one small package to you. So I think the resilience actually comes from the people, and the people trying to actually get, to get that flow and that rhythm, which is the hardest thing to do, because once one thing breaks due to something being manual or not automated enough, it creates, it creates a backlog. It creates actually a holdup in many things. So what we've been seeing is really how do we kind of automate as much as possible so that that fluidity as well as that agility is continuously there, so that the customer doesn't feel that delay, that the customer is in tune with everything that they need to be in tune with, but also that the 3PL or the logistic player in themselves have that visibility as well within their own supply chain.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And I guess you're right. If there's a dependency on people, one of the big disruptors that we have had is the availability of people and with the right skills. So automation is really the key to addressing that.
Absolutely. And we saw that a lot in the UK when there was when there was a shortage of drivers, and then the whole thing Brexit happened, and it created the whole like, okay, how do we get it even delivered now?
Yeah, and Brexit's still happening, I can assure you.
Yes, absolutely. I know. I can't hit pause on that one, but yes.
Indeed. Okay, lovely. Thank you. And Nick, maybe if I can turn to you. So what's your view? How have recent events accelerated supply chain transformation, do you think?
So I think, Kevin, I think we are in completely unprecedented times, right? We've got so many different things impacting our industry at the same time. I can't remember in 25 years ever experiencing anything like this. I think I'm also coming out of this feeling rather proud of our industry in terms of how reactive we've been. And I think for the first time ever now, logistics and supply chain is actually getting the recognition around how important we are as, to be part of everyday life for everyday people, right? And everyone's now recognizing just how vital that contribution is. We've seen, certainly in our customers, we've seen some quite sizable shift changes in terms of how they're trying to create differences in their supply chains. You look at, for example, the best example is probably the PPE piece. A lot of the PPE pre-pandemic was held offshore, and there's been such a sizable shift now to bringing inventory closer to end customers, which is reflected in things like warehouse occupancy rates, right? And certainly in the UK market, warehouse occupancy rates at the all-time highest. Space is absolutely premium. And as an industry, we've moved and we've changed process and thinking and supply chain practically overnight. We've been able to turn this on its head, still service, to take one of the other panelists' points here, still servicing a customer base with ever-changing consumer needs and consumer habits. My wife single-handedly raises the percentage of ordering things online with an intention to return it. So, I'm keeping Jeff Bezos in a job. But I think, joking aside, I think because of all those changes, we've had to do that with one eye on absolutely around how do we control costs whilst we're doing this, right? Because there's one thing that our industry is very good at is problem solving. We get a problem, we deal with it, and we deal with it in the most efficient way. And I think what's really interesting about this conversation is one of the major levers that helps solve that problem around efficiency and how to create that solution and with robustness is how does technology support us with it? So I'm really interested to see what people are going to say.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And I think you're right, logistics has always been important, hasn't it? And has changed and has adapted and has become more important over the last few years with lots of disruption and during the COVID pandemic, which has changed a lot of buying behavior. And it was certainly during that period that we coined the phrase "keeping Britain moving," which is effectively what we were doing through that period. But I think there's definitely been a sea change in government and the importance they see of logistics on the economy. Although I think we're still probably got a fair way to go with the general population, who just like to only really think about logistics when their parcel doesn't arrive on time. So let's move on anyway onto how you build resilience into the supply chain. In 2019, I think it was, PwC commented on the importance of supply chain resilience, saying it's not just about playing defense, it's also about playing offense, finding competitive advantage by shaping a supply chain resilience strategy focused on disruption or avoidance of disruption, sorry. So Katherina, from your perspective, what should businesses consider when building resilience into their supply chains?
So actually, I would like to touch upon answering that question based on what Nick was also saying. The moment that what we have seen is a huge trend of actually these like distribution centers and facilities and manufacturers actually popping up closer to where they have to actually have things distributed. And the reason, and I think actually that is one part of actually being resilient, because if you are not prepared to handle any of these orders on time, there is no way that they can be able to be shipped across, especially, you know, as we know from the Suez Canal situation, from other situations of blockages that have been happening, they can't predict it fast enough. So I think in order for us to be able to, in order for companies and especially technology companies to give these guys that technology, it's almost to be auto-suggestive or recommendations, or actually seeing and not being naive that, you know, something can happen due to either a war that's going on, due to you know, blockages, and being able to measure carefully how much people need, how much needs to be flowing through, how much, but in good time. So people have started to move a lot of things into kind of these facilities in closer to home. And I think that's been a very good, I actually think that's really good, because it creates more jobs at home as well. But at the same time, they need to be able to create a strategy of like what happens when things go down or things go up again, in terms of, you know, like when we have the holiday seasons. And to be able to do that, they need to also think about what they can automate within. So I would then suggest almost connecting their different facilities to one another. So that also means like orders coming in are connected. It also means, you know, understanding what that visibility of activity within each of the distribution centers, so that there is really almost a visibility of traceability of activity milestones that are happening throughout each part of their supply chain. I think once you have that clarity, you can actually make decisions faster. You can actually put technology there faster as well. And providing that allows us to not be like, okay, well, you know, I'm just gonna, you know, just see when my orders go up and so on. No, it's not just about that anymore. We have to also be on our toes to think about what could happen in case there is an issue. And I think the past couple of years has been an excellent suggestion of, you know, everything can hit the fan very quickly, and then, you know, you end up being very stuck in a situation where you may not have enough supply or even demand. It depends on the situation. So
yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Okay, and I think that's certainly a key role for technology. But we've also heard a lot about collaboration in recent years. So Nick, maybe I can ask you, how can collaboration between different parts of the network help to better manage disruption and change?
Yeah, so I think, so collaboration's been around for a long time, Kevin, right? And the notion of collaborating has been around. There's always been, certainly from the surveys that we've done with our customers, there's always been a few different factors as to why people resist collaboration. And a lot of those factors can be around fear of customer infiltration, fear of not delivering service that effectively you as a business are contracted to deliver. And I think we now, as an industry, have to recognize that to deliver resilient supply chains, to deliver an ever-changing customer proposition in terms of what they want to see, you can't do that in isolation. You simply can't, right? And this isn't just talking about, I guess, horizontal collaboration with partners. It's also talking about vertical collaboration with customers, right? How can you share in a collaborative way problems and then therefore drive solutions as a collective? And I think as an industry, we've been a little slow coming to the party in terms of how do we drive collaboration? And I think a lot of it is driven by historical fears of what happens if we give away control of an activity. What happens to it? How do we ensure that it's delivered in the same way, at the same price, with the same importance as if we did it ourselves? So I think and we are starting to see differences. There's some really good examples in the market, Kevin, of where businesses historically who we never put together are actually working collaboratively because they're maximizing space, they're maximizing vehicles, they're sharing resource and pooling resource in regions. That would have been unheard of going back even 5 years, never mind 10 years. And I think we just need to do more of it. And a lot of that, an enabler to that, is about visibility and protecting information, system driven, and having visibility of available resource, available space, available assets, to be able to then think of a different way of doing it with some assurance and protection. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you're right. I think that it's something that's really exploded, isn't it, over the last few years, and something that, because of that concern about data and security and knowledge, where technology clearly does have a clear role in identifying problems and helping to coordinate solutions to them.
Yep.
Katherina, I think you mentioned about multiple, more complex and multiple supply locations. And I think Gartner recently said that multiple supply locations must be seen more as a cost of doing business rather than an inefficiency. So what are your thoughts on the rebalancing of efficiency and resilience? I mean, is there a trade-off between efficiency and resilience, I guess, and profitability?
Of course, and I think it touches upon also what Nick was saying in terms of collaboration. If the place is, for example, if you have a distribution center and you work with multiple third-party players for last mile, middle mile, and you only have a certain amount of fleet, that collaboration needs to take place where you actually work with other parties, with other maybe even competitors. I believe it's important that this collaboration, and that we don't shy, and that we also pay that cost of, if you don't have enough vehicles, then you should be able to outsource that. You should be able to have something that allows you to tap into other partners. Without that, deliveries won't get done fast enough. So it's creating that communication across other players, working together hand in hand, being able to, to foot the bill a bit on when, you know that you don't have enough, and being able to actually be flexible. I think a lot of it has to do with that agility, when you can have your technology actually communicate quickly to another party and say, hey, I need 3 other vehicles. Can this wait? Does my wait, and what I'm delivering is XYZ. Does the capability matches yours? But that would be before a telephone call. Now it has to be automated, so that you could actually deliver on time, deliver correctly. And that is a cost, but it's a cost that needs to happen.
Yeah, it's an essential cost, isn't it? So Al, maybe if I can bring you back in at this point. I think touched on at the start, sustainability and decarbonisation. These are also big themes in our sector. Are they separate issues from supply chain resilience? So can I ask you for your thoughts on how resilience aligns or not with the sustainability agenda?
I think we've all got a duty, but also a requirement from our customers now to become more sustainable. We've been working on label-less return solutions to reduce paper waste by offering QR codes where consumers don't have to print a label. So that's basically making the label in the box for returns, I think, of the past, which has a lot of added benefit because if you're using a label in the box, you don't know what's coming back when it's coming back, who's sending it back until you've opened that parcel. So giving a lot more visibility, as well as having a sustainable benefit. But it comes after you've received the product as well. So we're seeing a lot more in the way of demand for recycling, demand particularly for e-commerce, and the rental market is starting to grow now. So most recently, Selfridges quoted a couple of weeks ago that by 2030, they want over half of their sales to be through rental platforms. So that's a really, really ambitious statement to make. And you know, we're not that far away from 2030. So you know, they've got a lot to do if they want to hit that target. But you know, they're leading from the front, and you know, we're working with other retailers that have got similar ambitions. So they're looking at what they do with the product when it comes back and how they resell that product, potentially using some intelligence to get that product back on sale in local market rather than having to transport it all around the world. So lowering the carbon footprint in the process, and also trying to eliminate landfill. That's a really important thing, particularly in the fashion industry, which has been famous for burning clothes even, and you know, that's just not acceptable anymore. So yes, there's a need from a cost perspective to manage that, but also from an environmental perspective. And we're seeing I think the leading retailers are the ones that are taking sustainability as a challenge head on.
Great. Okay, thank you. Let me just remind you, if you do have any questions for our great panel here, then please pop them in your Q&A chat, and we'll try and pick those up in a moment. But I wanted to turn attention now to a bit of, I suppose, a bit of future gazing. We are talking about technology after all. So Al, I'll stay with you for the time being. But Al, what new or emerging technologies are looking most promising to you to make supply chains more resilient or more effective?
I mean, obviously, automation has been incredible over the last few years. I was in an amazing warehouse yesterday that was fully automated in terms of it was 18 meters high. It had 278,000 tote box locations that were robotically picked. The conveyor belts were packing robotically as well, and you know, there was somebody checking and monitoring. But automation in supply chain is here to stay. I think there's still challenges around that, and big challenges to what we do with all the people as well. But you know, obviously that creates another problem down the line in terms of employment. But as far as Zig Zag is concerned, we're working on some technology around how retailers can save the sale. So that's working on things like refund to gift card or refund to the customer's account rather than giving a cash refund. So promoting keeping that retention. We're also working on live exchanges to tap into live available stock to make sure that customer can be offered a different size or a different color as part of the returns journey, and those items can cross in the post. Because we've got data on customers, so we're looking at lots of data to predict which customers are trustworthy or not trustworthy based on previous buyer behaviour, based on the order value, based on the location, and based on the amount of spend, for example. So there are different triggers. We're definitely seeing a demand for faster refunds, so instant refunds where we're refunding on first scan, and then in the future, I think we're going to be tying much more into the resale and e-commerce side of things as that becomes a requirement.
Great. Okay. Thank you. And Nick, you were talking about collaboration a moment ago. So thinking specifically about technology. So how can what's exciting you in that space? What technology is coming, do you think, that's going to help us be more collaborative?
For me, it's all about connected platforms, Kevin. So having platforms that give visibility of available work, you know, and we're seeing some emerging platforms now that's coming through. Full end-to-end visibility from, right from manufacturing right the way through to replenishment, and having that visibility alongside big data and system learning behaviors, I think is really exciting. I think that we are nearly there, and we're on the cusp of something quite exciting at the minute in our industry in terms of connecting those components. And I think having with that data visibility that we're getting better at now, we can make different decisions on. We can use that data to allow us to make the right decisions early and quickly, to respond to changing customer needs. It isn't, going back 10 years, Kevin, it was acceptable to order something online and get it in store in 7 days, right? There's more immediacy to what we need. And to do that, systems, technology is a big enabler to allow us to deliver what we need to do.
Yeah. Who's doing it really well, do you think? Who's leading that charge?
So I think there's a number of 3PLs that are out there, large global players, Kevin, that are trying to develop in-house systems to connect their own platforms. So WMS right the way through to TMS, optimizers, and there's products on the market that, from a technology perspective, that actually could take some of that pain away from the 3PLs. So I said it to one client the other day, why would you want to continue to invest in a platform if the platforms already exist in the market, that you then have the benefit of aggregated scale with other opportunities that people can use and utilize? And you've also got the splendid benefit, therefore, of tapping into that platform provider's innovation and constant research and development. So it all comes down to personal preference, right? And the problem that we've always had in the last certainly decade is everyone's tried to do it themselves. Everyone's tried to do it independently. And what you found in the market is the market has been saturated with platforms that do one thing. And the problem that certainly 3PLs have is by the time they've implemented said platform, that technology actually moved on. It's had to become quite obsolete. So we need flexibility in platforms that we use. We need flexibility in connected systems to deliver not just what we need today, but also to be able to migrate to tomorrow, because it's an ever-changing, you just described the ever-changing landscape of logistics over the last few years, right? It's not the same. And the problem is if we stick on a rigid platform, then all we're going to keep doing is regurgitating new implementations in the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the line. So I think having that flexibility to be able to grow with platforms and systems is really key.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, that long list of depressing things that I read out at the start, I think that only indicates, we might think we're coming into a period of more stability now, but I think probably what that list tells us is that we shouldn't think that. And actually, there's bound to be lots more disruptors. There's a lot of change going on in the world, and it's very uncertain times. And so maybe the same question to you as well, Katherina. I think about the question about collaboration or technology. How are supply chains going to evolve?
So I full-heartedly believe with what Nick said, and also with what Al said, because one of the things that we're realizing is that if we want to connect, it can't just only be at the ground level. We also have to go as far as connecting with the terminal operating systems. We have to go to also being able to create some sort of visibility at when things hit customs. It's no longer just about those little areas of what we can see. It's about pretty much connecting everything as much as possible, creating that integration. And as Nick was mentioning about, it is faster for platforms, like Quincus, for example, to connect with these guys because of the type of not only the engineering power that we have, but also to be able to learn and adapt faster than if you were to decide to do this yourself or to build it. These platforms, creating this network as a whole is intense. It's a lot of updating, a lot of communicating, a lot of trying to find how the flow of data goes in by pressing one single button and then making it accessible across the entire system so that everybody can actually see that data happening in real time. This is just getting these things correctly done well. I think we're still looking at a couple of years for the network to actually be, plugged into one another, and create and minimizing those black boxes. I think the black boxes are still there because of legacy systems, of systems that are unfortunately out of date, and that not everybody wants to kind of, because they have spent a lot of money. They have spent a lot of money with SAP, Oracle, these guys who have, put them in situations also where at that time and at this state, at where they were at that, it was the right thing to do. But now it goes back to also what we were discussing earlier. It needs to be flexible. It needs to be agile. Everything that connects one another has to have a proper adapter. And that adapter needs to be able to say, okay, I'm going to send the right data to the right place for you. And you don't have to think about it anymore.
So yeah, I mean, it's interesting, isn't it, on all of your thoughts? But it's that question which I led, which was probably new technology, but actually it's not really about that, is it? It's more about harnessing existing technology, and that's where the real opportunity is, I guess. And we're still fairly early.
Kevin, I think it's an evolution, not a revolution. I think that's where we are, right? Is we've got a lot of individual platforms servicing certain elements of supply chain. I think the key to this, like Katherina said there, is connecting them. How do you connect them to give you better visibility, to allow you to make quicker decisions with financial data to support some of those decisions? Yeah, and that's going to be the key. And I think once we get there, we'll see some sizable differences.
And that's very actually quite difficult, because if you think about it, every system has a different way of talking. So if you think about the amount of data that's being poured into one and poured into the next, they're not always talking the same language. So because of that in itself, that is just a long process, because you almost have to create, well, again, that adapter, but you have to create that, what is the right data that has to be pumped in and pumped out? What's useful for you? Like, there's so much junk out there that, when we're shifting through things, you don't need it. We realize, okay, actually this just looks beautiful, to you, but then is it really useful? So that's also something to consider when updating and adapting to new technologies. What do you really need?
Yeah, fabulous. I mean, many years ago, probably 10 years ago, I used to work at a sort of large global IT services company, and they used to be called SIs and system integrators. But I guess they're coming back into their own now. In that case, they're going to be fairly critical for some, finding creative ways of joining up systems and data to get the right sort of insight out of it. Do please ask some questions. I'm gonna sort of draw a close to our generic conversation. But if, as you can see in your chat, I think there is an opportunity to ask some questions. I've got a couple here that I will launch in with. I think either Al, Nick, or Katherina, if you decide who wants to answer some of these questions, and I'll try and fill the gap if there's silence. But so how do we close the gap between theory and practice of using digital supply chains, if you accept there is a gap?
That's it.
I think it's interesting. Sorry, Katherina, go on, please.
Oh, no, please, you go, Nick, by all means.
I think this is a conundrum that a lot of logistics businesses are faced with, Kevin, right? Is that, do we invest ourselves to try and plug that gap and create the capabilities to connect our systems? And what is the business case to support that? Or do we outsource to a provider who can solve a problem today? But noting the fact that by doing that, we give away USP, we give away something that is recognizably ours. So I think the short answer is, it really depends on the business that you speak to and their appetite to develop. My personal view is, global leaders have got great capabilities. They've got great capabilities, great global logistics businesses. But from a systems perspective, unless there's absolute certainty and a reason why you would want to develop your own in-house systems, if the capability exists on the market, why would you not take that capability? Why would you not outsource the responsibility of innovation to a platform provider who's got more focus, more expertise than you?
Yeah.
Sorry, I sound like a salesperson here for platform providers, but
well, Nick, I sound like I'm going to agree with you every time. I'm just like, yes, that's exactly it. But I would also add on that, something that I've started to realize is that when we're out here in the market and we're saying like, hey, I think you need this entire supply chain to be connecting in and out and pushing data here and there. You've got these, I'm not going to say dinosaurs, but you have some systems that are, some companies that all of a sudden start to freeze, because they're like, but I have so many pain points. Like, how do I handle all my pain points with technology? Like, that's just too much. That's too scary. And we realized that by actually trying to sell them an entire platform that has all this kind of beautiful technology that that's communicating is also not the way forward. I would almost take the approach of like, yes, understanding if you can't build it or you don't have the time to build it because you have other stuff, yes, absolutely, go and find someone that can build it for you or has it already existing. But more importantly, I would almost say, what is your actual pain point? Like, what is the exact moment in your swim lane, which is basically your supply chain, that you find to be the difficult part? Is it visibility? Where is that visibility issue coming from? Can you actually solve that single piece with one piece of technology and start from there without scaring everybody and actually causing disruption within your supply chain as well? Because that would be the last thing you want to do. The technology is still something quite, I'm going to say new, because it's really actually being developed within the past couple of years. And that connectivity and that calibration is also new. So people have to also consider, where do they want to focus and where can they apply technology, and then slowly grow that technology across the different swim lanes in their supply chain. So that would be my advice on where to start.
Yeah, and I think I often get drawn into those conversations around the excitement around and the power of big data and joining up information, and it can all sound a bit superficial or a bit generic, can't it? And I think you really do have to go into it with actually start from the point that maybe technology isn't the solution, but where are your biggest opportunities, where are your biggest issues, and address it that way and see how technology can help with those.
And I think, Kevin, just to chip in on that, I think there's a couple of different angles to it, right? So technology providers can provide capability, right? That's really important. What technology providers can also provide is impartiality to drive collaboration. So if a large 3PL develops in-house platforms that they want to sell to the open market to try and aggregate and utilize collaboration, there's always going to be the fear from competitors that if I push volume to a competitor's network, I'm going to lose visibility, lose the service element of it, and potentially lose commercial advantage on it. What I think a USP that a platform provider has is you can provide the impartiality to be able to aggregate multiple logistics businesses' requirements, but keep the data and the commercial sensitivity safe. So people don't have a fear of trading with a platform provider, and they won't have the same trepidation as if it was a logistics business that they are potentially competitors of. So I think there's two elements to it.
Yeah, and I think actually there's another question here around, I think you probably started to answer it, but it says, where can organizations start in their digital transformation? How can they shorten the journey of adapting new solutions?
So I might chip in there. I mean, I've personally, all the investments I've made in the last year or so have been in the logistics space, and there are specific disruptive technologies that I've invested in that are singularly, they're also solving a small problem, or some of them even large problems, but as a kind of ecosystem, they all hook together very nicely. So, I've put money into a customs business, obviously that's solving the Brexit issue. I put money into both first mile and last mile technology providers. A warehousing business that solves the supply chain issues for the SME market, which is kind of underserved somewhat. The technology layer that actually translates data, back to Katherina's point. So it transforms feeds from one platform to another platform, and can help retailers integrate. And then also in the two-man delivery space or two-person delivery space, it's also ripe for disruption, and it's quite sort of archaic in the way they operate. But I think overall, the way these what all these problems are being solved, they're disruptive, and each one of them is a specialist in its own space. And I think having worked in the last few years building Zig Zag, it was quite difficult at first to get retailers to outsource and to get comfortable effectively with handing over their returns process and feel that they could trust you with, you know, millions of their customers. But actually, once you can prove that it works, you know, they're knocking on your door. But retailers do have to let go, and not just retailers, but other 3PL partners also need to let go, and they need to be willing to partner with industry-leading technology, because otherwise they're going to get left behind. They've got to get there quickly. It is a race. Yeah,
absolutely. Okay, thank you. I think I'll probably try and wrap up here, but if perhaps I just get from this discussion today and from all of your great experience and knowledge, could you think of, if in your parting words, one thing that you think anyone listening to this call should focus on around technology and around supply chain resilience? So what's the key word for you? Happy to go in any order, but I'll come to each of you in turn.
I'm going to have to see turns.
Yeah, okay, yes. I imagine so. Nick, have you had thoughts on that?
I think there's a cultural change, and I think there needs to be a recognition, and we need to embrace that technology is going to be the biggest enabler for us. And I think that we have to recognize that to deliver ever-changing consumer needs, and to counteract some of the impacts that we're seeing in our industry, you know, technology has to be embraced, right? And we have to do. If we don't, the age you're saying is, if you keep doing what you're doing, you're always going to get the same result, right? And that isn't good enough for our industry. So that's not one word, Kevin. That's many words, but I couldn't think of a way to show it.
Sorry, I didn't really mean one word. I meant one theme. So that's great. Thank you. And Katherina, final thoughts to you.
Yeah, because I was going to say one word would be like, I was just thinking like dynamic collaborative systems. I mean, I was, even that's not one word. I agree with Nick. It is definitely a culture change, but it also goes down to ground level as well, where you think about how driver education is, as well as, you know, broker information, anybody that is on the ground handling pieces of information that are normally done manually. I mean, we're seeing also the case that drivers, for example, some of them just don't want to have another application. They don't want to drive anymore with another app. You know, and how do you tackle that? How do you tackle that when people are also afraid of technology? Because yeah, loads of companies have gone through beta, and they, you know, they're saying, yes, we can do this, we can do that. And you know, it's about creating that openness as well to new technologies, and not being afraid to kind of you know, attach yourself to something. Okay, where's the, you know, going back to one of the questions that someone asked, like where would I start? And I would actually start with a place where you don't have technology, or, you know, if you have good technology and you can integrate, that would be option number 2, but that could scare a lot of parts of your supply chain. So I would almost think, how do you create that collaboration in an area where perhaps you can just start by implementing technology and going from there, step by step, baby steps.
Baby steps. Excellent. Okay, well, thank you. I mean, this is always a fascinating subject, and it's accelerating rapidly. I think there's so much that can be done. There's so much opportunity out there, and there's also so much change. So I'm sure the debate will continue. But I hope everybody that's listening to this today, I hope you've enjoyed the conversation. I hope our panelists have enjoyed it. I have, certainly. So thank you very much to our panelists who kindly gave up their time and knowledge and expertise to give you their thoughts. To Al, Nick, and Katherina. And Katherina, I'll hand over to you maybe to close.
Yeah, on behalf of Quincus, I just want to thank everyone who attended this webinar, and really a big thanks to Kevin for hosting it. It's, you know, honestly, it's been great working with Logistic UK, and as well as, you know, having this wonderful discussion with the 3 of you. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Al, and thank you, Nick.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Goodbye.